Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Allen. Hope everything with the class is going well. The work's been great so far. I will do my best to try to keep up with the grading. I got a lot of things coming in fast and furious, so to speak, with my 4 or 5 classes that I have this semester, but I really do try to keep up with it. So I'll push on, but I'll be grading when I'm recording this year, week 2 materials, flip grids, and such. So um, I have some weekend viewing to go ahead and start. Couple things, and I'll say this with every video. This is going to be, I'm just going for one take already. One thing I'm noticing with this video is I'm filming in my office and the sun seems to come in and out on the windows. And sometimes it's dark in my room and sometimes it's light. So sorry if I kind of fade in and out there. Two, the next thing is I'm going to try to do this in one take, just so I'm going to push through. It'd be just like in a class. If I mumble or speak a little fast, you are welcome to email me. And I've also put up a little study guide sheet of things that are important with this class. So when I share the screen, I'll show you. It was on for last week, but just to kind of rehash that. Also, I'm going to probably this video is going to be a little longer than some of the other ones, mainly because I want to touch on service learning. As you can see, I just got bright again. I want to touch on service learning a little bit because I got some clarification this week, which would be September 3rd. I'm filming this. I got the clarification late yesterday on September 2nd and related to Boys and Girls Club. I sent out an email. Actually, I sent out 2 because I caught a couple of little typos I fixed, outlining what you have to do. But I want to make sure we're on the same page with that. And again, as always, stop by my office with any questions, concerns, emails. We can set up times if you all want to meet as a group. That's fine. Just contact me. If everyone's progressing as fine as is, though, I'm good. It seems like everyone's starting to really get in a flow, so thumbs up on that. So with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I want to talk about the service learning requirement. We're going to talk about behavioralism. Spit that out, a little bit of a mouthful. That relates to your Taking Sides article that you're reading, and just it's a concept that you're definitely going to, I think you'll be familiar with a little bit in the classroom. You probably already know what it is, and if you're not a big psych person, once you hear it, I think you'll understand what it is pretty simply. But we'll spend a few minutes on it. And good job with the ed puzzles. I notice everyone is on there, like cranking those out as soon as they are released. If you need one reset, I'm fine with resetting them. I'm more interested in you learning the materials than trying to give everyone a bad grade or anything like that. I don't think the questions are too hard. So if you need it reset, just tell me. One downside with resetting on Edpuzzle, you do have to rewatch the whole video and redo the questions. But I guess they're only usually about 10 minutes. So if you want to do that, just fire me an email. I think I've done it for a person or two already. So again, with all that being said, I'm going to share my screen and let's go. All righty. All right. As you see here, this is week 3. This will be September 7th through the 20th. I'm sorry, September 7th through the 20th. There's another one of those little goof ups I said I'm going to ignore. So I'm not going to restart this video. September 7th through the 13th, 2020. This week, our main goals are behavioralism and the movement to public schools. That's going to be something you're going to see in the video on Edpuzzle. Your readings, Taking Sides. Should behavioralism shape educational practices? Again, we're going to talk a little bit about that with the PowerPoint I'm going to do. I'm going to try to keep that within a 10-minute window. We're going to actually watch something. We're going to watch a clip of a show that I loved in the 90s that has a little bit of behavioralism in it. Your assignments this week, make sure you view Edpuzzle Part 2. It is already posted, and believe it or not, I guess people are getting alerts. Some people have already went through and have already completed it. That's fine. Awesome. Make sure you view this lecture. For better or for worse, view this lecture. And then also, again, you have your Edpuzzle, do your flip grid on the Taking Sides. And do not forget, your educational philosophy statement is due this week. That's the 13th it's due. I'll go over the guidelines for that here in a moment also, but I'm going to spend the first 5 or 10 minutes of this video talking about the service learning and the philosophy statement. All right, I'll come back to that material. If you look here, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the philosophy statement first. You can click right there. That's where you can submit it if you want. I have little questions that you can answer, or there's a little more detail on the philosophy statement right there, and I'm going to click that. But For this assignment, you will have to write a 2 to 3 page paper, double spaced, reflecting your ideas on education, schooling, and teaching. You may have already done this or completed something like this in 150 or other classes. That's fine. You can remold your ideas a little bit. I'm just want to know where you're coming from as far as why you want to be a teacher and what your ideas of education are. The main things to think about: why you want to be a teacher, what are your goals as an educator, and what type of teacher do you see yourself becoming. If you want a little more of an expansion on those questions, you can even click here, and it's a little more detailed, but as long as you're answering those questions in 2 to 3 pages, double spaced, that is fine. The question actually was asked when I asked for an educational philosophy statement. You really should be doing this in APA. I don't know how much APA experience you all had in 150. So one thing I'm going to go ahead and do this week, I will post up some APA resources if you need them. APA is what you're going to use if you go to graduate school in education. You're going to use it. You probably are going to use it in some of your more advanced classes in the setup. But the reason I even bring it up, some people have asked me before, do I have to write an abstract? Because that's usually an APA requirement for this philosophy statement. You do not. I'm not going to ask for that. And in all honesty, you're not probably going to do a whole lot of citing or anything on this because it is your philosophy. But just be aware, if there's any type of setup things other than the abstract, it should be an APA format. If you're familiar with Purdue OWL, that gives you some ideas or can show you some of the ways and samples of how to do that. But don't lose sleep over the APA. The main goal for this is just for me to see where you're coming from. So that is the philosophy statement. It is due on the 13th. The next thing that I really want you to recognize, and I'm going to probably bring this up a million times, but if you look here, I already created a spot. It's the service learning. If you click here, this is exactly what I sent out earlier to you all, but that is the service learning opportunities. And if you give me a second, I'm going to actually slide over and just open the one I have on my computer. And I'm going to make it big. I am not going to read this word for word because I sent it to you, but just to kind of make sure we're on the same page and for any verbal clarification. Usually for this class, we use Job Corps, Boys and Girls Club, and you have to pick one and you complete 10 hours there. Long story short, we can't use them this semester. COVID, Job Corps has no one even staying on their campus, and I guess the Boys and Girls Club is either closed or they're not allowing a whole lot of people into the building. So with all that being said, we can't do that, but that's fine. One thing, the name of the game during all this is flexibility. So what I've kind of done, and I've gotten permission and we're good, because there really wasn't a firm placement other than service hours for this. So we have a lot of flexibility actually with this. So you have different options to do to meet your 10 hours. They all have to be verified, but I'll explain that here in a second. But here's some things that you can do. You have to have 10 hours. And if you have any questions, just email me or stop by and I can clarify. Some of you have already reached out to me about tutoring and things like that. Those are perfect. But you can meet your hours this way. If you have anything that you do that is related to what you would feel like teaching and working with a younger population, such as tutoring, mentoring, maybe you work for a club, maybe you do something with 4-H, if you do coaching, if you do like a running club, if you do some sort of academic program, if you do some things at church, do you do Sunday school, do any of those things, all of that will work. The only thing I have to ask is you have a log, I posted it, and I'm going to put it under the service learning sometime this weekend, but it's also, I think, under week 2 right now. That log, you need to have someone sign off on it. They just need to initial it that you did your hour, you did your 2 hours. You can do any of that stuff. If you think you can get your whole 10 hours doing that, awesome. If you think you can do like 5 hours and you want to mix in one of these other things with the other 5, that's also fine. But the first one is you can do anything like that. Just give me the heads up and get pre-approval if you were going to do one of these things right here beforehand. The second thing, I've gotten some mixed messages from rumors on the street, but I contacted the social studies fair coordinator and it sounded like they were rolling with it. Berkeley County Schools, they're going to still probably do their science and social studies fair. They just may do them virtually because they don't know if they're going to be able to allow people in to judge or not. They would love to have people from 200 be willing to judge, especially if it's virtual, because I think they feel like you all might be more comfortable doing the judging than their normal set. I don't know if anyone's ever judged the social studies fair before or taken part in a social studies fair before, but usually it's a older set of judges. I've judged a lot, but I'm kind of old, but not that old. Uh, Same thing with science fair. They're going to get back to me. Obviously, school hasn't actually started yet. They're starting on September 8th. But once everything calms down, they said that once the school starts setting up their fairs, and if they decide if they're going to do it, they'll reach out to me. So there might be opportunity there. I can't guarantee it because, you know, everything's kind of fluid right now with COVID. But if you're interested in doing this, I will relay the information. They would love it. Even if you have your hours and you're willing to do it, maybe we can work out some sort of extra credit thing, because I actually think judging the fairs, I did it. I worked with them for 15, 20 years, somewhere in that vicinity. And I think you get a lot of experience. You do some assessing, you get student communication, you get to look at projects, you know, and you can different grade levels if you want to do elementary, middle, high. You know, it's a nice opportunity. So that's one way you can do it. I don't know if you could get your full 10 unless you did a couple of fairs. Some fairs seem to go longer than others, but I definitely know if you do one, you're going to get 2 to 3 hours. So if you do 2 to 3, you would probably easily get your hours. But we'll talk about that when that opportunity arises. The next one, which is something that I have a feeling a lot of people may just end up doing, and that's awesome. I've already started to build it. You can view some best practices and teaching videos. I'm actually using the Department of Education in Massachusetts. They have a nice set of videos where they have classroom teachers and they're teaching. You just watch them teach and some of the methods and such that they use. I have posted a bunch on Sakai. I'll show you those here in a second. And for each video, you get 1 hour. What I have done is I've put them on Edpuzzle, so you can't skip ahead. Sorry. You can't skip ahead, and when you get to the end, you just basically type your name in, so I know you've done it and such. I would take some notes, because with all of these, you're going to have to write a reflection at the end for the end of the semester on your experiences. But if you want to do these, each one counts an hour. I know the videos themselves are usually around 35 to 40 minutes. Don't worry if they are, because my thinking is you might be stopping the video to rewatch some things. You're probably going to be writing down notes by the time you sign in things and answer the question. It's going to be close to an hour, so I'm good with that. So for each video, you get an hour. I'll keep log. I'm the verification on that. So if you want to do those videos, that is fine. If you want to do, like, let's do, for an example, you did some tutoring for 5 hours and you watched 5 videos, that's your 10 hours. Next thing, I have this on here. I'm going to try to get some guest speakers in October and November, maybe to kind of talk about some things. I can't guarantee it. I'm going to try to set it up. I would love to do it live, but I might just see if they can do a Zoom, and if they would come in and talk for an hour about some things. Those would be something, you know, an hour. So if you did both, that would be 2. I can't guarantee that one yet. I'm going to email the people this weekend, but I didn't want to bother them too much with the start of the school year right off the bat. For obvious reasons, they're probably pretty busy and everything seems to be kind of a little bit chaotic. So once the school year kind of settles in, I'll try to see if I can get them to come in. If everyone's interested in meeting live, just fire me an email. Maybe we can set something up live. I have no problems with that. Of course, we'd have to have some parameters as far as masks and such. That's why I thought Zoom might be easier, because I know they'd come in, and if you want to meet, you can listen to the speeches and, you know, get your hour. And I can verify it right there, because you'll be in the Zoom and I'll be in there too. The other thing, very similar type thing, I have 2 films I was thinking about showing. I was probably going to show them if we met live anyway. They're both about an hour and a half. And if you want to watch one of these films, again, I'm debating whether to set up a live session, or I'm going to see if I can show it on Zoom. I'm going to double check on copyright and requirements and things like that, but I don't think that's going to be an issue, because I'm not trying to make money or anything on it. So I might set up some times, and if you want to watch these videos, we can kind of do it as a group watch, and then we can kind of debrief afterwards. If the debriefing goes for a while, they may be upwards of 2 hours that you get for each video. One would be something called paper clips. It's a little dated. I started showing it when I started adjuncting, which was, believe it or not, a long time ago. It's, when you look at it, there's still a lot of late 90s fashion, even though it was filmed in 2001, 2002, but I still think there's a lot of good things in there with it. You'll see both videos kind of relate and connect a little bit to my social studies experiences, but I think all educators will get something out of it. The other one is it's called the address. It's a Ken Burns thing, and it has to do with like a boarding school that's in uh, Connecticut, and they're trying to learn the Gettysburg Address. I'm going to set up dates for those, and like I say, they might be Zoom viewings, but you'll be welcome to do those, and I think you can get probably 3 to 4 hours out of that. I haven't set up the days because I want to look at the calendar, and I might even send out a little survey in Google form, or I'm sorry, in forms, just to kind of get an idea of what time might work best for anyone. I'm probably going to do it on a Monday or a Wednesday, but we'll kind of go from there. And again, those will be optional if you think you're going to get your hours another way. It's just I'm trying to give you a little bit of variety and flexibility. Last thing, if you can think of anything that might work for this, ask. Again, it's actually not a bad thing. You got a lot of flexibility this time as far as how you meet your hours. So if there's something that you think might work for this, tell me. I just need you to get 10 hours. And of course, on the syllabus, and I'll rehash this a little farther down the road, but you still have to do your reflection that's due at the end of the semester on your experiences. That's nothing major. It's just kind of what you learned from it or anything like that. It would be wonderful if we could use Boys and Girls Club or Job Corps and kind of get that experience. But I think this might be a positive because you might get a little bit of a different thing, and maybe you'll get some real world experience if you can do social studies fair, or if you're doing tutoring or things like that. So long story short, let me go back. I'll take that one out. If you look right there, whoops, on our regular page, maybe, you hit service learning. There's that. By the way, I'll show you the typo called away instead of aware, but blah, blah, blah. If you click this right here where it says videos of best practices, I've already put up, I'm sorry, I said 6, but I put 5 videos up already. I'm trying to put a variety up. There's a 10th grade math class, a kindergarten math class, a social studies integration. Actually, I have a regular social studies one I need to put up, and I will put that up this weekend. There's an 8th grade reading class and a science class. Just click this link. It should take you to Ed Puzzle. And boom, and there's the video. As you can see, this one's a half an hour. It's an open-ended question at the end that you have to answer. It's mostly your name, and just make sure you're taking notes so you can jot down, because if you're doing 10 of these, when you write your reflections, you're just going to cite some things that you saw. I may even tweak some of the questions on the reflections. This is kind of fluid for me too. I was really hoping Boys and Girls Club will be open so we'd be a little more streamlined, but that's, again, flexibility, flexibility, flexibility. So that is everything there. If you need any questions, or if you don't understand what I just said, fire me an email, stop by my office, we can meet, whatever works. If not, if you have some things that you're doing, just do them. If you're doing the running club, if you're doing anything like that, I'm going to keep my eye out for some other possibilities if you want to, and I will share them immediately when I get them. If you can do something that's live and tutoring and all, I think that's fantastic, or anything working with students. So anyway, like I say, I've already had 2 or 3 people. I think someone asked, someone, I won't mention names, actually asked, they're helping with choir at one of the local schools. That's fantastic. You're working with students, you're kind of teaching, actually not kind of teaching, you are teaching. So that's spot on. So if you know something like that, again, if you're helping coach a football team, that's awesome. If you do lessons of some sort, again, great. So anyway, that's service learning. I know I got a little winded, but I wanted to make sure I talked about that. For this week, week 3, this will be moved up. Already went over that. There are our things that we're going to talk about with that you could potentially see on the midterm. But these are the things I'm going to talk about today, and I'm even going to streamline this a little bit, and I'll come back and tell you what. As you can see, there's everything that you need this week. PowerPoint is there. There's the philosophy turn-in. There's the Ed Puzzle. There's the flip grid, which is on your taking side. And there's some behavioralism examples, which I will show you here when we're talking. As you can see, I've kind of streamlined the PowerPoint a little bit of the things you need to know. I'm going to go ahead and tell you because they're very briefly mentioned, and I'm not going to get bogged down with them too much. Watson, the main thing you need to know about him when I'm talking on the PowerPoint is he's kind of seen as the guy who kickstarted modern behavioralism. And a lot of the guy that we're going to talk about, B.F. Skinner, he kind of roots back to that. Same thing with Edward Thorndike. He was a Harvard teacher. He was at Columbia Teachers College, which I think I said in last week is kind of like the predominant uh, teaching college or teacher education college in the country, especially in the early 20th century. So Thorndike actually comes up with something called the law of effect, which influences this guy, B.F. Skinner, who is going to be the guy you really need to remember when you're coming out of anything from this PowerPoint. But all of this is important. And since I'm already talking and I have this screen up, I'll just go ahead and save myself one little slide. If you're wondering what behavioralism is, it's an educational theory, as it says there, which states all behaviors are learned through interaction with environment through a process called conditioning. And when I pull up the PowerPoint, I'm not going to go word for word through the PowerPoint. So I just want you to kind of think about it this way. Think about when you were in school, when you would walk into some place, when you would walk into a classroom, you may have had a bell ringer every day that you went in there. Why did you go to that class? Well, you went because you heard the bell ring and you knew you had to be there within 5 minutes. You were conditioned to do all these things. That's conditioning. That's one thing in school. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about it. That's a pretty broad set of examples. There's things in your classroom where conditioning can be an awesome thing. There's also ways that conditioning may not address all situations. And I think, some people feel like conditioning can go to the extremes on some aspects. So with all that being said, let's pull up the PowerPoint. And if you need it, it's right there again. All right, there we go. I'm just going to pull it. And like I say, I'm not going to get too bogged down in reading this word for word, but I'm going to highlight what I really think is important for you all. And then we're going to watch a clip on a couple of things. All right. First thing, I've already kind of explained what behavioralism is, but I will read through these just so you kind of have an idea. Behavioral psychology is the study of external behavior, basically how you react to certain environments. Behavioral is objective and observable. That's another key point, and it's going to be a critique of this, is where all behavioral, you can monitor it. It's objective and observable, whereas what goes on in one's mind can never really be known or measured. The mind is a black box, so to speak. And you're always responding to some sort of organism or stimulus type thing when you're in the classroom, a reaction. We're going to talk about it. It's basically rewards and punishments in the classroom. So that's it. And like I say, I know I read those a little bit, but I wanted to give you a little more like hardcore, concrete type definition or meaning. You probably already know about this. Most famously is going to be Pavlov. If you've ever heard of Pavlov's dogs, he was the Russian psychologist who basically, he conditioned his dogs when they would hear a bell or music to come. They knew steak was coming. I'm going to show you the chart here in a minute. Why don't we just go down there and do it? There you go. Basically, what would end up happening is, let's just jump down there. What Pavlov did, he had a dog. And dogs, of course, would, when they see a steak, they would start to drool and have saliva and things come out of their mouth. They knew the steak was there. What Pavlov did is when he started to bring the steaks out, he started to play music. So when the dog didn't have steak but would hear the music, there was no response. Nothing went on. But when he started to introduce playing the music when the steaks would come out, the dogs would kind of start to associate the music with the steaks. And he did this for a while. And I'm summarizing this very briefly. So after a while, what happened, let's jump back. Steaks cause drooling. Music without the steaks, no drooling. Add the music when the steaks come out, you start to get the drooling. And what ended up happening, he conditioned the dogs that when they started to hear the music, they started to drool or have saliva come out of their mouths, even without the steak, because they associated that music with the steaks over time. And that's conditioning. And that, I think you can probably start to see what's going to happen with, and how this might relate to a classroom is you're going to start to establish routines and things like that. I'm actually going to shrink this. I'm going to show you a clip This is of The Office. I saw this. Actually, I was going for the one we're going to watch on The Simpsons, but I know a lot of people like The Office, so I went ahead and put this one on here. But if you watch what happens.
Hey, Dwight, do you want an Altoid? What do you think? Dwight, just one Altoid. Sure. What are you doing? I don't know.
So I don't need to play that again. And hopefully you kind of picked up what was going on if you could hear it. Every time the computer noise was played, Jim would give Dwight an Altoid. But at the end, did you notice the computer noise was played and Dwight put his hand out and Jim wasn't going to give him the Altoid? He was conditioned to expect the Altoid. I'm assuming he were Altoid. I think he said that. He expected that Altoid when the computer noise was made. That's Pavlov's study. So you kind of have it there. So with that being said, there's another guy, and this I mentioned Watson, and I'm not going to get too much into him, but this is a quote by Watson. And again, he kind of takes Pavlov's stuff and goes to the next level. He was famous for saying, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well formed, in my own special world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take any one at random and train them to be any type of specialist I might select, a doctor, a lawyer, an artist." So he's saying if he controlled the situation, he could kind of guide him to whatever he wanted to do. Obviously, there's, I hate to say it, there's a little bit of arrogance in that statement. And also, there was some controversy with him because a lot of times they would work with younger children, and some of the things that they did, people didn't like. It was a different time, so I don't want to get into it too much. But they were doing things like taking things away from the kids, introducing them. It was, a lot of it, I think, ethically, we probably wouldn't do today. But with that being said, he was trying to control behavior and see what he could do. So Watson's kind of seems to be the guy that is the godfather of behavioralism. He kind of moves on from Pavlov. The guy, though, really, that we need to be familiar with, there we go, would be B.F. Skinner. As you can see there, he actually didn't pass away that long ago, at a nice age of 86. But he kind of takes Pavlov's things and he instead of doing classical conditioning, he does something called operant conditioning. Skinner was into education. He believed that behavior is sustained through a system of reinforcement or rewards, which if you think about it, we do implement in a lot of classrooms today. I'm going to give you an example here in a little bit, but he didn't believe in free will. He believed that you could kind of control what was going on in the classrooms. I don't know if I totally agree with that, but that's Skinner's kind of idea. He was also famous for something called the Skinner box, which was a box where he would have a rat go through it, and it had systems of rewards and punishments, maybe a little shock or something, and it would condition the rat on how it was going to operate the maze. I'm going to show you a Simpsons clip that actually is a form of the Skinner box. It's very famous. And as it says there, operant conditioning it involves conditioning voluntarily controllable behaviors. It's got a little more flexibility, I think, than that classical conditioning. And as you can see, I'm going to go down here. Teachers can deliberately use this type of conditioning to basically train your students. And I think that's what I'm trying to get to with this mumbling here in the last slide or two, is with operant conditioning, it's almost like you're training your students. Think about it when you were in school, or if you've been in schools and gotten to do some observations at this point, even with your 150 class, there's a routine to the day. And that's something most teachers do, greeting students at the door. Make sure when you come into the classroom, you've started doing the bell ringer. When we leave, we're going to do an exit ticket. Things like that. You're trying to train your students. Now, again, there's rewards and all, and these rewards and punishments are, sometimes debatable. Might be good grades, might be extra credit. might be some sort of snack, it might be things like that. But with that being said, you're trying to train your students. That's the operant conditioning, B.F. Skinner. How someone reacts to our behaviors determines whether or not we can continue the behavior. Like it says there, if we are rewarded for something, will we likely do it again? Do you do this as a teacher? So again, that's something that you have to be aware of. And I'm going to say it now so I don't have to say it on a later slide. But one thing that came up in something I was reading, and I thought they still did this, but I had read that they are, but the article I read said they're no longer doing it. If you ever did the bookets for Pizza Hut, they were a reward system. It was supposed to what? Condition you to do what? Read. And the more books you read, the more pizza you had, and the more pizza you had, the more pizza you could eat. What some people started to criticize that for was students they weren't reading spontaneously. They were reading with the reward in mind, and maybe they weren't reading for comprehension and things like that. They were reading just to check off a box. And some people didn't like that. That's a critique, basically, of this operant conditioning or this type of training. So, there's pluses and minuses, but again, it's the training of your students in a classroom, the routine type thing. That's behavioralism as far as an educator goes. And there's a little chart there if you want to really break it down. I'm going to have these on the next slide, but as you can see, there's what Skinner calls the positive reinforcement and the negative reinforcement, and I'm going to dive into those. Positive reinforcement, sorry, I'm going to just read it for simplicity's sake. Positive reinforcement, you behave in a certain way that results in a reward, and as a result, you are more likely to repeat that behavior. So maybe if in a class, I don't know if I would recommend this, but I've seen people do this. Maybe if everyone gets done on time, you have a minute or two of free time at the end of the class. That might be a positive reinforcement if you do a nice job on there. Or if you maybe you have a test of 21 questions, and if you get number 21 right, it is counted as extra credit. That's just a positive reinforcement or a positive reward. A negative reinforcement, you behave in a certain way that results in the removal of something unpleasant. And as a result, you are more likely to repeat that behavior. For example, maybe doing a paper is assigned and you view that as being a negative reinforcement, but you can turn it in early. That's removing that negative reinforcement. In both cases, as it says there, something happened that you saw as good, and as a result, you want to exhibit that behavior more. So those are good things. You're trying to train your students. If you can get your work in on time or be ahead of time, it's out of the way. It's done. You're not rushing. I'll use a personal example. I mentioned social studies fair with the service learning. I used to stress to my students, why don't you maybe do it over the summer? Because I was the coordinator at one of my middle schools, so they knew they were going to have to deal with me with it. And I would give them all the guidelines. And if you have it done, if it was a requirement in the class that they were in, it was done. You didn't have to worry about it during the school year, and you could come in. That's removing that negative type aspect for them because they didn't want to do the assignment or not. So anyway, and a positive reinforcement might be maybe they win. Maybe there's a good chance, or maybe they get extra credit for having it in on an assignment, or maybe it counts as a test grade. There's different positive reinforcements and negative reinforcements, but these are things you want to encourage the behavior you want in your classroom. And this is probably maybe something you'll get into a little bit with your classroom management classes. And consequences for behavior, of course, we call those punishments. A consequence that follows a behavior so that you do that behavior less in the future. A punishment can involve adding something. In the real world, it could be paying a fine. Maybe you have after-school detention in the educational world. Maybe you lose something. You might lose recess, something like that. But in both cases mentioned above, adding something or removing something you perceive as bad, and as a result, you want to have that behavior less. So, of course, we do that in school. Maybe you have lunch detention. You do something you can't eat with your friends, and the goal of that punishment is hopefully to discourage whatever punishment or whatever activity got them in that lunch detention. That's behavioralism. You're trying to basically train and eliminate behaviors that you don't want. I think that's an easy way to kind of define it. I'm not going to get too much into this because we've kind of said that, but well, let me take that back. This is one of these things where if I was in class, I probably would have said, oops. But I am going to read this just because I think it is important to know. Negative reinforcement, something unpleasant is removed, and as a result, you are more likely to do it again. Something happened that was good. This is the difference between a negative reinforcement and a punishment. And as I said, this is maybe getting an assignment done early because you'll accept it early. The assignment is kind of the negative because the students don't want to do it. But if they get it done early, it's removed, so it's good. It's, it's out of the way. A punishment is actually a consequence that happens because there was something done that is not acceptable. You don't like it and you don't want it to be done again. The punishment can add something or take something away. Maybe students are talking while you're talking, and there's something where you're just like, all right, there's no talking at all. Maybe if you have group, all right, better example, you have group work going on, and you say everyone can talk in a low volume. You kind of give a warning. Maybe if you're in elementary, you have one of those stoplights up, and you move it from green to yellow. And once it goes red, there's no talking. Everyone has to work independently. And if it goes to red, you take it away. No one can talk anymore. That's the punishment. You can't talk. So there's different variances of punishment, but that's again behavioralism. You're trying to shape the behavior again that you want with this philosophy. That's actually the Pizza Hut example there that I had there, so I'm not going to read that again. But some other critiques, that was a critique of it, is that it didn't encourage reading. It just encouraged trying to get more pizza. Another critique is not all behavior in schools is you can observe it. And I mentioned this way back at the beginning. Watson, Pavlov, Skinner, the guy I mentioned with the study guide, Updike. These are all guys who observe things and they monitored for behavior. That's, it's in schools, you can't see everything that's going on all the time to monitor that behavior. If you're in a middle school or in a high school, there's a lot of time in the hallways that you're not, there's teachers out there trying to watch and monitor things, but they're not going to see everything. So, this is, there's merits to it in a controlled environment, maybe like your classroom, but, again, you're not going to see everything. And again, it says there behavioralism only accounts for learning through direct experience with the environment. Again, not observational learning. So, there's pluses and minuses to it. I think you can definitely see how we use it in education, in that when you have your own classroom, you're going to come in there and you're going to try to set up the training, the routine of what you want every day. First week of school is a lot of times with that. It's usually, I especially think about this with those of you that are in elementary school, you're going to try to establish routines, especially with the little kids, K through probably 2, it's all about routine, getting establishment. The older kids, they can come in and, you might have a little more, I don't want to say things will be looser, but, the number of routines may not be quite the same. You could also make the point that maybe they've already been conditioned enough that they're not, you don't have to retrain them. So when they hear the bell, they knew that from 6th grade. So when they're in 12th grade, they know they have to be in their class. So it's a little bit on behavioralism. I do want to show you something though, because I mentioned the Skinner box. I have to admit, I like The Simpsons a little more than I like The Office. Actually, I'm going to admit this. I like The Simpsons a lot more than I like The Office, but I saw The Office clip when I found this one. This is like one of these old early 90s Simpsons, but this Lisa thing actually gives a good example of the Skinner box. Maybe, possibly. Let's see. There we go.
Mom, I read my project in the science fair in 3 days. Oh, I've got an idea. Why don't you run a hamster through a maze? Help me! Help me! What's so funny? I was just thinking of a joke I saw on Herman Ted. I want the most intelligent hamster you've got.
Okay. This little guy writes mysteries under the name of J.D. McGregor.
How can a hamster write mysteries?
Well, he gets the ending first, then he works backward.
Oh, come on.
Look, kid, just take him before his mother eats him, all right?
I propose to determine the answer to the question, is my brother dumber than a hamster? At least, look what I can do. Oh, darn it. Stupid books. Hey, a cupcake. Hamster 1, Bart 0. Experiment 2.
This is the
Food
Skinner
is
box.
connected to a mild electrical current.
You'll see in a
The
minute.
hamster has learned a valuable lesson. Beware the hand of man. Wise guy, eh?
That, I'm going to pause that. That's kind of what would happen in the Skinner box is when the hamster, or I'm saying hamster, the rat would go through, there might be a little shock on certain doors, so it would learn not to go through that door. But if it went through other doors, there were treats or things like that. So, go ahead and finish this out.
Hamster 2, Bart 0.
Behold gravity in all its glory.
Pretty lame, Millhouse.
Can I touch it?
I've worked too long and hard on this for you to screw it up now.
But it's got my name on it.
Just stand over there. Over there.
Behold the flying machine that will carry me, Phileas Fogg, around the world in 80 days. Dang, I was aiming for his head.
Don't think about beer. Alcohol-fueled car. One for you, one for me. One for you, one for me.
I don't know if I like you experimenting on your brother.
By the way, it's probably, I just thought of this. Actually, there's a little bit of conditioning there too, where if you think Homer's thinking about alcohol, which is probably not a good thing, but he's conditioned to start drooling. That's a very Pavlovian type thing.
Please, Mother, it's purely in the interest of science. That'll learn him to bust my tomato. Step right up, folks. We'll answer the question that has been plaguing scientists for ages. Can hamsters fly planes?
Oh, look, he's got miniature goggles on.
Oh, and a little scarf. Isn't that adorable?
Oh.
But this project has no scientific merit.
Oh, take a bite,
You
sister.
see sour grapes.
Lisa, every good scientist is half B.F. Skinner and half P.T. Barnum. I don't think I need to see the other exhibits. First prize!
And if you saw there, Bart's reward for doing a science fair project, which he's someone who doesn't always do work, is being, winning first prize, which was also what Lisa wanted and things like that. But the main thing I wanted you to take out of that was the reward system. That's kind of how Skinner set that up when he had the box. There was things that punished the organism that would go through, specifically the rat, and he would get shocked. So with all that being said, those are up if you're interested. And I think that is basically what I wanted to tell you about behavioralism. I'm going to jump back here to our main page slowly. There we go. Don't forget this week, you have to do your Ed puzzle. You also have to do your flip grid and your philosophy statement. Anything that you need from here is posted here. If I kind of started mumbling or such, or kind of went down a rabbit hole that you had no clue what I'm talking about, hopefully you took it away. Main thing I really want you to know is behavioralism. It's basically you trying to train your students on a routine in your classroom. That's how I think about it. We were a psychology class, we probably dive in a little deeper, but we want to think about this in terms of our educational world. So everything that you need is right there. An Ed puzzle, what I want you to know from that viewing is all posted there. Those are things that you might want to write down or keep notes of somewhere. And that should do it. So hopefully everyone is having a good start to the semester. And if you have any issues or questions, please contact me again. I'm sorry, I'm going to say that a million times, and I'll catch you later. Thank you.